The film opens with Perfidia Beverly Hills walking past an immigration detention center before meeting the rest of her fellow revolutionaries from the group known as the French 75 at the U.S.-Mexico border. Among them are her boyfriend, Ghetto Pat Calhoun, as well as Deandra, Laredo, and Jungle Pussy, all of them gathered to plan a daring break-in of the detention facility. Stocked with heavy equipment, explosives, mortars, and tear gas, and orders Pat to create a major distraction to draw the guards' attention. That night, the French 75 put their plan into action. The team slips past fences and drainage ditches, neutralizing guards as they free detainees from the emergency tents. While her comrades move swiftly, Perfidia enters the command post and confronts Captain Stephen J. Lockjaw inside his tent, declaring that their mission is nothing less than a declaration of war against injustice. Lockjaw is dragged out of his tent in humiliation as, outside, the team fires off fireworks to distract the guards. They proclaim to the captured officers that they are now political prisoners of the French 75. Once the operation is complete, the group escapes in a station wagon to the cries of revolution echoing behind them. The team drives off to celebrate their victory, and Pat and Perfidia begin to grow intimate. The scene shifts to a bomb-making session, where Pat explains how to prevent accidental detonation and carefully preparing the main charge, while Perfidia stresses that the detonator must remain safe until the precise moment of action. Amid the tension, they perform a ritualistic gesture to channel their intimacy before the next strike. Perfidia then uses a public phone to announce that a bomb has been planted at a certain campaign headquarters. A massive explosion rips through the building as Perfidia steps into the street to declare that only revolutionary violence will prevail. During their flight to the next target, Pat and Perfidia push a cart that appears to be loaded with explosives. This becomes part of a larger wave of French 75 attacks, planting bombs at politicians' campaign offices and destroying power towers to cut electricity to the entire city, while Lockjaw shadows the group, tracking Perfidia's every move. On another day, Perfidia and Pat disguise themselves to infiltrate an administrative and judicial building. They retrieve a bomb from a ventilation shaft and carefully attach the detonator. Lockjaw catches Perfidia in the act of planting the device and offers her a choice: go through with it or back off, hinting at a meeting later that night at a hotel. At the hotel, she keeps her word and meets Lockjaw, sleeping with him but maintaining complete control over the situation, kisses him while pressing a gun to his body. The scene then shifts to a vast grassland where Perfidia, heavily pregnant, fires a machine gun while Pat and the others laugh at her wild display. Later that night, they gather around a campfire. She then speaks with Jungle Pussy about Pat, going so far as to threaten that if she is not treated the same after giving birth, there will be serious consequences. And Pat, overhearing the exchange, can only wonder if Perfidia truly realizes that she is carrying a child. Heavily pregnant, she sleeps on Pat's sofa, while Pat speaks with his mother Jenny, who insists that she does not believe Pat is right for Perfidia, and that he is incapable of taking care of both Perfidia and the child. Pat himself is convinced that the baby Perfidia carries is his, and calmly declares that the child comes from a line of revolutionaries, but Jenny sharply counters that Perfidia is only a runner, while Pat is rigid and cold. Tension rises as Jenny questions what plans they truly have for the baby. The story moves to a new chapter. Eventually, Perfidia gives birth to a daughter named Charlene, and in her journal she confesses a growing jealousy toward her own child after watching Pat devote himself entirely to the baby. This sense of invisibility and exclusion deepens until Pat realizes he can no longer persuade Perfidia to remain with him and Charlene as a family, and he leaves them behind to return to his life as a revolutionary. The focus shifts to Pat, who is seen in a convenience store buying baby supplies, when Captain Lockjaw suddenly appears from behind and asks about his child. Upon learning that the baby's name is Charlene, Lockjaw makes a shocking and unsettling remark about his fondness for black girls, leaving Pat confused and frightened and setting a new tension between them. Soon after, Perfidia and the French 75 launch a bank robbery. Jungle Pussy climbs onto the teller's counter, points a gun, and loudly declares that the act is a symbol of resistance. But the situation spirals out of control when Perfidia shoots and kills a security guard who is reaching for his weapon. The robbery collapses, and after a frantic car chase across the city, their van breaks down, forcing Perfidia to flee on foot until Lockjaw and his men capture her in a narrow alley. Her face is bruised as she is wheeled away in a wheelchair, surrounded by police officers and FBI agents who cheer as they celebrate her arrest. Captain Lockjaw visits Perfidia in the hospital where she is being held, coldly calling her a murderer who will spend decades in prison unless she gives up the names and locations of the remaining members of the French 75. Meanwhile, realizing that he and Charlene are in danger, Pat arranges for his daughter to be taken to the sanctuary city of Bacton Cross, and under the guidance of an ally, they assume new identities as Bob and Willa Ferguson. Perfidia eventually enters the Witness Protection Program, while other members of the French 75, such as May, Laredo, and Jungle Pussy, are hunted down and killed one by Lockjaw.
Bringing justice.
In the end, Lockjaw receives a government award for his actions. 16 years after the revolution, Willa Ferguson is now 16 years old, and at school she wears a purple belt and shows off her karate skills, while Bob, his hair tied back, watches anxiously and protectively as he meets her history teacher. Bob's radical views on historical figures reveal the shadow of his past life as a revolutionary, while the teacher praises Willa as an exemplary student and a leader admired by her peers. Bob lowers his gaze with tears in his eyes, admitting that Willa has grown up without her mother since she was a child, and he is overcome by grief for the past and the sacrifices he has made for his daughter. The scene shifts to two soldiers reporting to Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw, and with his face flushed, he cuts them off sharply to ask whether Skinner truly understands what this is about. Dressed in a suit and tie, Lockjaw is picked up by a luxurious black SUV and taken into a grand room. As he smooths his hair with a small comb, he is greeted by men in suits, including Virgil Throckmorton, who praises Lockjaw's outstanding work against uncontrolled migration. Lockjaw answers with conviction, repeating the slogan, "Save the planet, control immigration." Throckmorton then explains the purpose of the meeting. They want to induct Lockjaw into the exclusive Christmas Adventurers Club, an organization that uses military tactical expertise to stop dangerous people. The death of Jim Kringle has opened an opportunity, but Lockjaw must first undergo a voluntary vulnerability test, a full double background check in the style of Yankee White to erase any moral concerns. Lockjaw accepts, and Throckmorton leaves looking satisfied, while Lockjaw remains alone in the room with his face flushed between regret and hope. The story moves into a tram where a bespectacled member of the French 75 appears paranoid and suspicious of those around him. While transmitting from his home, he is suddenly ambushed and taken hostage by unidentified operatives working for the military who suspect him of arson and subversive acts. Two boys who witness Howard's arrest send out a danger signal to warn the remaining French 75 members still alive. In the interrogation room, the man is identified as Howard Somerville, also known as Billy Goat, a former associate of Bob, who once provided Bob and Willa with their new identities. Howard has been captured by the indigenous bounty hunter Avanti Q. The information extracted during the interrogation finally gives Lockjaw the identities and location he needs, the false names Bob and Willa Ferguson, and their presence in Bacton Cross. data that forms the basis for his plan to deploy a large force while gathering intelligence on drugs, youth hangouts, and points that will make the operation easier. The scene shifts to an old house where Bob faces Willa as their relationship cracks under the weight of the past. Willa questions her father about his habit of coming home late and brings up their old group, while Bob tries to deflect with a story about his friend Albert and vintage musical equipment. But Willa unleashes her anger about the car, about responsibility, and about her fear of him drunk and crashing into a telephone pole. Their talk becomes an emotional exchange as Bob misquotes a proverb about dice and Willa corrects him with a cynical tone before telling him to leave and act like an adult. Bob tries to admit his faults and praise Willa's courage, but still looks disappointed and sad. When a red car stops outside the cabin window, the tension rises. Bob wonders who has come. A boy comes to the door calling for Willa, and Bob confronts him, asking his intentions and whispering a cold threat not to try anything. He then watches Willa and her friends leave, sighs deeply. Bob now sits alone on the sofa, watching the Battle of Algiers, when the house phone rings. He answers casually, but quickly grows confused as he hears an old greeting code from the caller. He struggles to recall the code he has not used in years, while the message becomes clear. Howard Somerville, also known as Billy Goat, has been kidnapped, and the hammer has been launched toward Bacton Cross, a signal that a major operation is underway. Realizing he is now a target, Bob switches into full alert, but his drug-damaged mind make it hard to remember the codes. He flees the house before Lockjaw's men can capture him. Lockjaw tries to lure Bob out, but he escapes through a tunnel. Bob then goes to a public phone to call someone to arrange a meeting point with Willa, but he cannot remember the answer to the question, "What time is it?" and fails to convince the person on the other end to give him the information he needs.
Maybe you should have studied the rebellion text a little harder.
Did you just fucking hang up on me, you fucking liberal fucking prick?
Lockjaw's forces shift their operation to the high school hosting the dance. Soon the operatives enter the school and begin questioning Willa's friends. In the bathroom, Willa communicates with Deandra through her father's inherited scanner, recalling Pat's message to trust the device's owner completely. Deandra urges her to leave immediately. They push through the crowd together and make it to the waiting camper van. In the tense escape, Willa asks about her father's fate, and Deandra replies that Pat is trained and knows what he has to do. Bob then goes to Sergio's dojo seeking help, and again tries to reach the contact person to secure a meeting point, but fails as the phone call becomes chaotic and tangled with codes, threats, and taunts between underground organizers.
And the question is, what time is it?
What is your name? I need to know your name.
Comrade Josh.
Comrade Joshua. Fucking ridiculous name for a revolutionary.
Okay, this doesn't feel safe. You're violating my space right now.
He confesses his past as part of the French 75 and admits the bad habits that have followed him for decades. The conversation ends with an agreement on a shelter location, a compound called Sisters of the Brave Bush in the hills, with its coordinates delivered in a rushed tone. Amid the chaos, Bob hands his weapon to OG and prepares his escape via the rooftop toward a car waiting in Lapham's alley. Sergio encourages him to stay strong. Bob shouts, "Viva la revolution!" before disappearing, while Sergio drops through a trapdoor in the floor and seals it with wooden planks, leaving the apartment empty when the troops finally storm in. In another interrogation room, officers pressure the teenagers, forcing them to reveal Willa's phone number until threats and intimidation make one of them confess that the number is saved under the name Hello Kitty. When the phone begins to ring, Deandra catches it and throws Willa's phone out the window of the car. A radio report soon states that Willa's phone is moving south on Highway 135. The troops who failed to capture Sergio pull back from the corridor, while on the dark blue rooftops of the city, the silhouettes of Bob and his companions try to escape. The flight ends badly as Bob runs through a narrow alley, falls, and collapses in exhaustion. Sergio's next report confirms Bob's downfall, saying that he has fallen 12 meters into a tree and has been captured by officers with a taser. Deandra takes Willa to the next meeting point, a hidden convent of revolutionary nuns who once knew Perfidia as the Rat, but ultimately trust Willa to carry out her mission there, while Willa is wounded to learn that her mother had betrayed her comrades instead of being the hero Bob had always believed.
Perfidia Beverly Hills is a problem.
The scene shifts to a dark blue Ford Mustang Shelby GT350 speeding through an upscale Beverly Hills neighborhood before stopping in front of an elegant Spanish colonial house. Tim steps out and is greeted by Alice, declines banana pancakes, and descends through the house's tunnel into a secret meeting room where he is welcomed by Virgil Throckmorton, Bill Desmond, and Roy Moore. They exchange the greetings Merry Christmas and Hail St. Nick, phrases that sound strange for such a meeting. Roy asks Tim to clarify a rumor that Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw is suspected of fathering a mixed-race child based on old documents from Jungle Pussy, while Bill reveals that Lockjaw hired Avanti Q to capture Howard Somerville, the former French 75 member who smuggled undocumented immigrants and founded a sanctuary city. Tim connects all of this to Perfidia Beverly Hills, the former French 75 member who disappeared from witness protection, and seeing this as a betrayal of their personal ethics, Virgil orders Tim to kill both Lockjaw and Willa.
And may St. Nick be with you.
All hail St. Nick.
The scene shifts to a cramped room where Bob Ferguson sits in an interrogation chair after his capture as an officer urges him to stop banging his head on the table and shouts if he even knows his own last name. Bob stalls by giving fake names, first Batman, then Peter Parker, and the officer threatens that things will get worse if he does not give his real name. Cornered, Bob finally reveals his identity and calls himself Jim Parker. After the interrogation, he, now identified as Jim Parker, is taken to a hospital with his face still battered, while another nurse records his data, asking about his medical history, including whether he is diabetic and has taken his insulin, details that leave Bob startled. As she draws his blood, she quickly whispers escape instructions, telling him to cross the bathroom and at the far right take the emergency exit now. Bob double-checks now, then springs into action, dashing from the room into the emergency stairwell where Sergio San Carlos waits with a red sports car. Bob hugs Sergio in relief, calling him Sensei, my brother, with emotion, as they toast with cans of Modelo beer, Bob exclaiming that they made it and asking their destination, the Sisters of the Brave Bush, Chupacabra Hills.
Not every day you get to rescue a 75er. Twice in the same day. Let's rock and fucking roll!
The story moves to a long and empty desert road where a black SUV screeches to a stop at an intersection, and Colonel Steve Lockjaw, he approaches a bearded shopkeeper and coldly demands information until the man finally admits seeing a gray van heading north on Crow Creek Road. Lockjaw, tracking Willa to the Sisters of the Brave Bush, asks what is actually in those hills, and the man hesitantly answers that the place is inhabited by nuns who grow marijuana. After confirming that their number is around 10 to 20 women, Lockjaw decides to move on the location. Lockjaw and his team finally locate the convent where Willa is hiding. He enters the church and comes face to face with Willa already bound to a chair. Moving quickly, he pulls on black gloves, swabs her mouth, and feeds the sample into a Swift Kit ID system for an on-the-spot paternity analysis, warning that if the test lines do not align, she will be free, but if they do, it means serious trouble for her. Willa stays defiant while tied up, and when Lockjaw asks if she thinks she is his daughter, she angrily replies that whatever the result, she already has a father and it is not him. Lockjaw's fury erupts as he insults her mother and presses the machine's button. The genetic lines on the screen appear aligned. He repeats his threat in an icy tone, making it clear the result means trouble. On the way to the rendezvous point, the police spot Bob and Sergio on the desert road with an open container of alcohol, and Sergio accelerates, trying to give Bob a chance to jump from the moving vehicle. Bob is too nervous to leap, so Sergio is forced to push him out. He finds another car, hotwires it to start the engine, and drives alone towards the convent where Willa is held. After a long journey across the desert, Bob finally arrives near the convent, watching the building from behind a sand dune as he raises his rifle to survey the situation. At the same time, Lockjaw, who has already taken Willa into custody, prepares to put her in a car to take her away. Seeing his daughter about to be driven off, Bob cocks his rifle and aims it directly at Lockjaw's vehicle. Meanwhile, Lockjaw takes Willa to a remote location in the desert where Avanti is already waiting and orders him to take the girl to the Salton Sea to have her eliminated.
You see that? You see that?
When Avanti arrives at the isolated site with other armed men, he can't bring himself to harm a minor, and in an instant turns on them, shooting the men down but taking a fatal bullet himself. In the chaos, Willa seizes the chance to grab Avanti's car and speeds away from the place. Elsewhere, Lockjaw, believing his business with Willa is finished, drives alone on the desert road when another car suddenly pulls up beside him, and without warning, its driver Tim Smith fires a shotgun at Lockjaw, knocking him unconscious and sending his car crashing off the roadside. Bob passes by soon after, fearing the worst, but finds only Lockjaw lying motionless.
Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Orderville Junction! Willa!
Willa sees Smith getting closer, and Bob races his car toward her. She stops at the top of a hill and hides behind a rock as Smith, speeding too fast, fails to see a car in time and crashes into its rear. He gets out and approaches Willa, but when she gives him several revolutionary codes he cannot answer, and she immediately shoots him before he can capture her. Moments later, Bob arrives at the scene and finally reunites with Willa.
Willa?
Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville!
It's your dad!
Elsewhere, Lockjaw survives the attack, but his face is horribly damaged. He returns to the headquarters of the Christmas Adventurers and, with venom in his voice, claims he has been reverse raped by Perfidia. The organization appears to promote him and give him his own office.
Wait here, I'll just grab him from my office.
Yes, sir.
But in reality, they trap him as poisonous gas fills the room and his body is later thrown into the furnace. Meanwhile, Bob and Willa finally return home, where Bob hands her a letter from Perfidia addressed to Willa as Charlene, a letter that allows her to make peace with her mother's actions. On the radio comes news of a large protest about to take place in Oakland within a few hours. Willa says goodbye to Bob to join the protest, and this time Bob is no longer afraid of facing their future.